Welcome to the Committee on Agriculture, Veterans, Broadband, and Rural Development. We are in session, and we do have a quorum. Folks, today we're going to mess around with the schedule a little bit. We're going to start with concurrent bills. Senator Abeler and Senator Kupec both had the same great idea. So they're going to present a bill together. Senate File 629 and Senate File 257. Then we'll hear presentations from our friends with Minnesota pork producers and the Minnesota soybean growers. So we'll have a pork and bean interlude. Then we will hear Senate File 1552 from Senator Kupec about grain buyers modification issue. And then from Senator Gustafson, who will talk to us about farm to school and early care programs. So to start us off, Senator Kupec, Senator Abeler, if you would please introduce your bills.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. I was trying to convince Senator Abeler that we should get a little hat and cane and we could do a little dance, but oh yeah, he may still go along with that. We will see for the Kupec Abeler Ag Show here. So yes, we both have the same great idea. Mine has a slightly different tweak to it. But basically, except for the little tweak, it is basically the same bill. So the Farm to Food Shelf program has been in existence since 2016 and is implemented through the Department of Agriculture. Its purpose is to provide funding to help 5 Feeding America food banks serving Minnesota purchase milk and protein and pay for the harvesting and handling of excess produce from Minnesota farmers. All foods purchased are distributed to food shelves at no cost to them. The base funding for this program is $1.7 million a year. In 2023, the legislature appropriated an additional $250,000 a year for the fiscal year 24-25 to pay for additional milk. This money was not added to the base as an appropriation. So our two bills here will add that money to the base as an appropriation. The difference kind of comes in with some of the money in my bill also is available funding for the Good Acre. The Good Acre has provided produce to hunger relief network since 2021, traditionally through state funding or through the LEAF program. This funding has never been guaranteed, and the Good Acre has had to return to the legislature each year to ask for continued support. This change in the farm to food shelf language will ensure that LEAF continues to receive that state support.
Thank you very much, Senator Kupec. Senator Abeler, anything to add?
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's just a pleasure to, people think we just fight all the time down here. Actually, that's, sometimes they do, but so actually a lot of the work we do is quite collegial, and it's nice to co-present with my good colleague here on these worthy causes. And so it's gonna be quite a session. And probably the money we're asking for is probably your entire ag budget, which I think this is a good place to put it. So if you need any help just to get done now and just vote it out to the Finance Committee. But so it's really just, we don't have to debate the merits. I know everybody here is a fan of this stuff, and the challenge is gonna be how do we retain the good programs we have. And maybe by trying to expand one, then people will see it's a good thing to retain. And so, I mean, this is about milk, it's about vegetables, protein, and there's even a report, Mr. Chair, at the end that you'll be able to read. And I just do want to point out on behalf of the dairy industry, and my good friend Dean Erdahl, who's retired, that the milk is being purchased at low-cost bids, and they're spending only 2% for admin. So this is an example of the frugality of the Minnesota ag industry, and I think this is a good bill, and I hope you can do it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Abeler, for being here and for the spirit with which you inhabit our space. We got some presentations. Folks, tell us a little bit more about this. Ms. Wallerstadt, if you would please state your full name for the record and commence your testimony when you're ready.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. My name is Sophie Wallerstedt. I'm the Public Affairs Manager at Second Harvest Heartland, and I'm here with Lindsay, who can also introduce herself to do a quick little presentation to tell you all what Farm to Food Shelf is.
Sure. Thank you for allowing me to be here today. Lindsay Akmonic, Director of Sourcing and Demand Planning at Second Harvest Heartland.
And we know you have a busy agenda, so we'll be quick about this one, and the slide should be in your packets, members, but just real quick, for Second Harvest Heartland, we are one of the largest food banks in the nation. Our mission is to end hunger together. We work with over 1,000 partners and food programs across the 41 counties in Minnesota and 18 in western Wisconsin that we serve. And we work in partnership with the other Feeding America food banks that are located in Duluth, Rochester, East Grand Forks, and then Fargo, which serves the Lake County in Minnesota. I love this because this just really shows you what the path to hunger relief looks like. So you can see the food donations and purchases that food banks make that are sent to our volunteer centers to be packaged. And then those foods are sent out to food shelves and other hunger relief organizations that are then distributing them to our neighbors across the state. Really quick, I wanted to include this pie chart that shows the combination of state and federal government funding that Second Harvest Heartland specifically receives. You can see that the majority of it is federal, and then about a third of it, and most of that is actually the Farm to Food Shelf program, and half of that is milk. This is a little bit of a just an image to show you kind of where we are right now. We've been seeing demand increase since the pandemic. Those of you on other committees have probably heard this. But we've been up to in fiscal year 2024 providing 145,300,000 meals. And then I'm going to pass it over to Lindsay to talk about the important parts.
Thank you. So in addition to the slide that Sophie shared that was the path to hunger relief, this gets into a little bit more of how the food makes its way to Second Harvest. So in addition to our Farm to Food Shelf funds and other farmer partnerships, the slide shows the diversity in our food streams and the different distribution types to our partners. On the left-hand side, you can see all of the different types of supply that we leverage. About 60% of that comes through our warehouse, which you can see on the top, goes out to other food banks or our agency partners and gets directly to the plates of our neighbors who need it most. On the bottom, there's a variety of different food streams that really go straight from the source to our agency partners and where we don't need to leverage the infrastructure and logistics of our organization. As was mentioned in presenting the bill, the Farm to Food Shelf program started in 2015, funded through the Department of Ag. It really was meant to compensate farmers for excess produce that was donated to food banks and again getting to our food shelf partners. It was $1.95 million each year with $850 for milk, and the base funding is $1.7 million a year, including $600,000 for milk. As Sophie mentioned, we are a part of what we call the Minnesota Cluster of Food Banks. So that's 5 food banks that are all a part of the Feeding America network. And so an investment of this program really does reach the entire state. This is a map of the growers as well as the food banks in Minnesota that we have leveraged as a part of this partnership. You'll notice that there is a concentration in central Minnesota. That is just basically where most of the farms are that are able to produce at scale for this program and that we've partnered with. But we are always out looking for additional growers and farmers who want to be a part of this program and establishing relationships where there is excess product that can be leveraged to the food shelf network. This is a map of all of the partner food programs that received Farm to Food Shelf products. So again, you can see there's a concentration within the Twin Cities metro area, but coverage really throughout the entire state. And so it's really great to see that we're able to take food that exists in a pretty centralized location and get it out to the entire state. As we look at spending for the year for fiscal year 24, you can see how the product type breaks down between produce being the majority of pounds, and that's just because of the rate being so much lower than the other 2 categories, but continued investment in both milk and protein as well. One thing I would love to call out is the entirety of funds in this year were spent in the first 4 months. That shows, I think, the degree to which the need exists and the demand that Sophie spoke of. And secondly, I'd like to call out the fact that we were able to negotiate a lower milk price in that year, which saved an average of 12 cents a pound. So obviously those funds were able to go a lot further. Shifting into fiscal year 25, our funds have been spent more slowly this year compared to the last 2 years, and really that is just due to less supply out there because of the rainy growing season and less incentive for farmers to donate since reimbursement rates haven't kept up with costs. And then additionally, we did not spend protein funds during the first 2 quarters of the year as we wait for sufficient Minnesota-produced product to be available at a cost-effective rate, because we want to make sure that we are able to expand and extend the reach of those funds as widely as we can. And at this point in the year, both Second Harvest Heartland and Channel One Food Bank have spent their entire portion of milk funds. And so from there, we start to supplement with our own internal funds to ensure that that product is still available to our neighbors. This is a chart that shows really the variety of product that's available. This is one of the benefits of this program is we carry what we consider a core 4, apples, potatoes, carrots, and onions on an ongoing basis, and then 2 or 3 additional varieties as available. But really, this allows us to increase the amount of variety that's available to food shelves during that that peak growing season here in Minnesota. This also just shows what I mentioned in being able to renegotiate in 2023, the rate that we were paying for milk and the reach that then is able to be funded, and also highlights though the fact that in the last quarter we are seeing an uptick in dairy prices as well. Another reason that incremental $250,000 that isn't in the base would be extremely helpful. That is all we have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your presentation. We have one last testifier. Ms. Witherspoon, it's good to see you again. If you would please come to the table and state your full name for the record, commence your testimony when you're ready. When Ms. Witherspoon is done, we'll have a conversation, potentially with, if you guys want to stick around or not, you're welcome to.
Hello, Mr. Chair. I'm Virginia Witherspoon, Executive Director of Channel One Regional Food Bank in Rochester, and we are one of those food banks that works really closely with Second Harvest Heartland on this grant. We're facing a hunger crisis in southeast Minnesota. In our region, Channel One distributed almost 19 million pounds of food in calendar year 2024 and almost 14 million in 2023. That's an increase of 35% year over year. When I started 7 years ago, we were distributing 10 million pounds. And since then, we have not had a meaningful increase in staff. So we're doing a lot more with the same amount. And thank goodness we were able to distribute more food because we're also serving a record number of shoppers, which is what we call people who are seeking our services. The entire region had a 32% increase in household visits compared to 23, and that's 78% compared to 22. The other thing that's shocking is the number of new shoppers that we have. At our food shelf, at Channel One, we're a food bank and a food shelf. So at our food bank, we're running one of the biggest food shelves in the state and by far the biggest outside the metro area. And we track our new shopper registrations, and those were up 40% in 2024 and 68% if you compare to 2022. So those are people that have never had to ask for help before, but because of inflationary grocery prices and the cost of other consumer goods, they rely on us. And something that I think is interesting and I guess gives us faith in people is that we invite shoppers to come weekly to shop with us, but half of them only shop once a month. So people are truly using us supplementally when they need to. At the same time, we're also seeing a decline in donations. In the first half of 2024, comparing to the second half, our corporate donations were down 23%. That includes distribution centers, food manufacturers, growers, and trucking companies, and down 19% with distribution centers alone. Also, our national donations that come through Feeding America were down 25%. We're pulling every lever that we can locally. We increased our retail rescue. That's food we get from grocery stores, gas stations. Anywhere you buy food, we're rescuing food from there by 44% by completely rerouting our trucks and our routes. That was a huge undertaking. It was definitely worth it, but we don't have any big swings like that to take anymore. Farm to food shelf is absolutely essential to us. We're already making hard decisions. We're not buying eggs anymore because of the egg price. We're not seeing the value, and we're worried about having enough milk. Farm to Food Shelf provides 15% of the total milk that we need for our region, and it's also how we get wonderful produce. So we appreciate the donations that we rescue from the retailers, but that's a mixed bag. It could be, today I saw lime-flavored Pringles, and not that those aren't delicious, but they're not as valuable as the produce that we're getting from this grant. So we really need this funding, and we appreciate the support. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Witherspoon. Members, do we have questions or comments for any of our testifiers, the bill's author? Nice job. Senator Kupec, do you have any closing statements you'd like to make?
No, I just want to, thank Senator Abeler for also bringing this bill. He's also a co-author on my bill, too, so he really, really does care about this, so much that he authored and co-authored the same bill, so that's a great stuff. But, and I know, visits to the Great Plains Food Bank, which is up in Fargo, which serves over into my district, that particularly the milk allotment that they got through this program last time was a huge benefit to them. It is one of those things that, it's just not, it's not an item that is donated regularly. When you think about what you drop off or what is left over as excess food, that's usually typically not one. And it's a really important part, and it's also really good support for our dairy industry.
Thank you, Senator Kupec, and thank you all for your testimony and for the work that you do. These are hard times, and you're helping people. So I hope you're taking care of yourselves, too. Senate File 629 and 257 will be laid over for possible inclusion. Thank you, Senator Kupec. Next order of business is how do you do with the Minnesota pork producers? Mr. Timmerman, if you would please, come to the table. State your full name for the record and commence your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chair Putnam and committee members. For the record, my name is Daryl Timmerman, and I serve as a board member on the Minnesota Pork Producers Association's executive board. I just recently finished my 2-year term as our board president. I live just outside of North Mankato with my wife Angela and our 3 children. I grew up on my family's corn and soybean and pig farm in southwest Minnesota. And I've personally been involved personally and professionally within the swine industry for the last 15 years. It's an honor to provide a brief update for you today on behalf of the more than 3,000 family pig farmers who call Minnesota home. I would be remiss not to acknowledge that the last 2 years have been difficult and financially stressful in the pig business. The pig farmer operates largely without a safety net, and frankly, we aren't typically asking for one, but what we do seek is limiting undue burdens that make it even harder for family farmers to endure through difficult market troughs. In September of 2022, the Iowa State Estimated Livestock Returns Model, they reported the first of what would be a 19-month string of losses in the U.S. swine industry. It wasn't until March of 2024 that model resulted in there being profitability. During that time frame, there was $27 of losses on every single pig that went to market. That was the average for that time frame. Certainly some times were worse and some were better, but that was the average. And so to put that into context, that's about $4,700 of losses on every semi-truck that you met going down the road, sustained for 19 months. So certainly the industry had some adversity through that time frame. We've been able to rebound, but driven mainly by the rising of the extreme inflationary feed costs, labor, and other supply chain challenges, Minnesota's pig farmers have felt significant financial pressures to evaluate their expenses and efficiencies. Certainly a challenging time, but we're optimistic that the future will begin to restore profitability. And starting in April last year, that did take place. And so things are moving in the right direction, but certainly a lot of equity to put back on the balance sheets. While growth has been relatively stagnant for the last 5 years, we saw significant opportunity and therefore growth in our business from the late 90s right up until the pandemic. Minnesota was home to some key advantages that set our state apart. First, it takes progressive, savvy farmers to navigate the many challenges of raising pigs, none of which makes Minnesota a great place to raise pigs as possible without the cultural values of family farming. Despite increased consolidation, market access challenges, and market volatility, Minnesota pig farmers found a way to persevere and become a significant economic driver for the state's economy. In 2023, more than 30,000 jobs in Minnesota were connected to the pork industry, and as an industry, contributed $3.3 billion to the state's GDP. Second, Minnesota is uniquely positioned with supporting industries like pork processing, ready access to key feedstuffs, primarily corn, and key byproducts like DDGs and soybean meal. There's key resources in veterinary medicine and transportation that all make raising animals and getting them to market efficient and affordable. Keeping pigs healthy is the number one priority for farmers. Working closely with industry-leading veterinarians, many of whom are based here in Minnesota, has helped farmers make strides in improving the overall health of our swine herd. The network of businesses and enterprises that support Minnesota's pork industry increase our endurance and resiliency. Third, Minnesota farmers can fully utilize and upcycle a valuable byproduct from pigs, which is manure. Manure is a valuable resource to nutrients for raising the crops that become the feed we provide for our animals. We have some of the richest soils in the world, and by utilizing manure instead of commercial fertilizer, farmers can build soil health and protect our water quality. Feed represents the single most expensive cost for raising pigs. In Minnesota last year, we sold 16 million market pigs. Feed made up 55% of the cost to raise each and every one of those animals. Manure helps reduce the financial and environmental footprint of feed. The ability of our family pig farmers to continue farming in Minnesota is a frequent topic of discussion amongst our members. Through voluntary efforts, Minnesota pig farmers are working to measure, quantify, and report on our work to operate our businesses in a sustainable way. We've set goals that reflect the industry's widely adopted We Care ethical principles, including animal health, public health, food safety, our communities, our people, and the environment. We continue to grow the participation in our We Care sustainability reports that help measure our progress over time against our goals for things like increasing carbon sequestration and reducing water use, but also the development opportunities for farm employees and pork donations made to our state and local food shelves. As an industry, we are proud to share our commitment to continuous improvement. We have an obligation to be good stewards, and it's one way we seriously take every day. We've heard from our farmer members about Minnesota's increasingly burdensome tax environment, costly and lengthy permitting process, and expensive and tight labor markets, putting additional stress on farmers and their businesses. As a mature industry, the ability to permit, remodel, and invest in our barns will become increasingly important. Aging barns require maintenance and replacement, and without a transparent, predictable, and financially reasonable permitting process, we will see farmers who choose to exit the business because the barriers become too significant to overcome. Similarly, state rules and regulations not based on science will put undue pressure on farmers looking to invest in their farms in Minnesota. As Minnesotans, we all care for our shared natural resources. We believe farms can grow and prosper in Minnesota while protecting our land, air, and water. Minnesota's income, business, and estate tax codes create disincentives for farmers. Farming is extremely capital intensive. Much of farmers' investment is in land, animals, and equipment, with many farmers investing profits back into the business or simply trying to pay down debt. Ensuring that farming businesses can transition between generations without significant cost or taxes will be key to future success in Minnesota. Additionally, the tight labor market and increasing costs to comply with Minnesota's new labor mandates further erode farmers' competitiveness with our neighbors in neighboring states. Minnesota farmers have taken great strides to adopt technology where possible, but at the end of the day, caring for pigs requires hands-on, skilled workforce. Minnesota's farms vary in size from sole proprietors to large enterprises with many employees. These sweeping mandates add significant costs and weigh heavily on farmers' decisions. Profitability matters, and sometimes it feels like that's forgotten or looked down upon. But it's what makes investing in our people and our communities possible. We're appreciative of many initiatives at the state legislature that support Minnesota's livestock and broader agricultural industry investment programs, like the Center for Rural Behavioral Health and the Livestock Investment Grant Program. Soil Health Financial Assistance Grant and the Rural Financial Authority help support the next generation of agriculturalists and the health of our rural community and workforce. Investments in support of the Board of Animal Health, the University of Minnesota's Veterinary Diagnostic Laboratory, and the Office of Preparedness and Response at the Department of Agriculture are all critically needed as we work to prevent and prepare for animal disease outbreaks. As a swine industry, we've invested significantly in activities, plans, and exercises to ensure we can respond swiftly to an outbreak in our swine herd. So in closing, our industry has certainly had some headwinds. There's some opportunity on the horizon, but at the end of the day, we're confident that Minnesota's pig farmers will continue to have the opportunity to thrive here in the state of Minnesota. This help will be brought forth with streamlined areas around permitting, as well as the continued support of our Board of Animal Health to ensure that our health of our animals can continue to have the resources necessary. Chair Putnam, thank you for inviting us to share an update on the pig farming here in Minnesota with your committee. I welcome any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Timmer, for your testimony and for your clear description of some of the challenges and opportunities that Minnesota pork faces today. You mentioned a tight labor market. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges the pork industry is facing in terms of getting folks to work in this industry, but also some of the challenges that those workers themselves are facing?
Happy to respond to that. So yeah, when you think about the labor that's necessary for providing care to the animals in our barns, it takes a skilled workforce. And so when you think about the skilled labor resources that are available and the geographic proximity as far as where the barns are located, the reality is that there's just a gap in there as far as you look at the people that are here and able to provide some of that labor. There's just a shortage. There's a gap in regards to those folks. And so some of the challenges that that some of the local employees do have would be on some of the daycare resources at times. That certainly would be a resource that's helpful in helping ensure that those the employees that are local in the area that have young families have the opportunity to participate in the workforce and have confidence that their children are being cared for at the same time.
Thank you, Mr. Timmerman. Members, do you have questions or comments for Mr. Timmerman about Minnesota pork? Senator Kupec.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've spent a lot of time in this committee talking about bird flu and its impact on our turkey industry. We've probably not spent as much time talking about African swine flu. So, you know, obviously, if you want to just talk about what that would mean, you know, if that were to be an outbreak to our pork industry here in Minnesota, and also, you know, do you feel like we are prepared should something like that arise, and you know, is there something else as a legislature we should be doing on this front?
Mr. Timmerman.
Yes, thank you, Senator. In regards to the African swine fever, certainly, yeah, there's a lot of anxiety in our industry on that. I think the thing that gives me some confidence is that our industry and our state has done a really good job of working with our Board of Animal Health to have resources that are in place. Our state veterinarian has done a great job of collaborating with neighboring states because this is viruses don't respect the state lines, and so some collaboration on that front has certainly yielded dividends. There's been a lot of work on behalf of individual farmers as far as being able to proactively step up the game as it relates to traceability within our animals and which animals are on which sites and which days that they move and which employees are traveling back and forth and those types of things, which are going to be incredibly important in the event of an animal outbreak. And so if it were to come here to the U.S. anywhere, it certainly is going to impact trade. Trade's a big deal for our industry, with 25% of our product on a net basis being exported. So that's a big deal. But I would just encourage continued support of our Board of Animal Health and those resources as it relates to the testing facilities to ensure that if or when it occurs, that we have the resources available to handle it quickly.
Senator Kupec?
Thank you, and let's just hope it's an if and not a ever or when.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, Senator Dornick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Timmerman, for your report. Appreciate the work you do, and as you were talking about the difficulties in the last few years, and the pork industry is many times kind of up and down, right? It's it's either kind of lean or it's good, and I think there's been more lean years. But I was going to ask you a couple. You mentioned some undue burdens. Just a little bit more on those, if you would. Maybe the manure issue and maybe the labor mandates, if you're okay with just kind of talking a little bit about those.
Yep. Yeah.
That'd be great.
Mr. Timmerman?
Yeah, happy to expand on that. Yeah, so when you think about some of the, from an undue burden and from a manure perspective, being able to ensure that the manure can get applied on a timely basis is important. It's kind of twofold. Number one, you want to make sure that we can responsibly get it removed from the facilities on time so that there's no issues on that front. But more importantly, it has to do with as far as getting it applied to maximize the value and the fertilizer value, and being able to get it applied in conjunction with the timing for the row crop operations. So thinking primarily about the soil conditions in the spring as compared to soil conditions in the fall, that would be a challenge. And so producers, pig farmers that have that manure, if they have to wait to apply till the spring, they then have the burden of potentially having lower yields. Lower yields really relates to higher corn cost on your own production and that kind of a thing. I think your other question had to do, I'm sorry, can you?
Mr. Chair. Yeah, so some of the labor issues.
Labor. Yeah, so yeah, as it relates to labor and some of the bottlenecks there, I would say some of the paid family medical leave and some of the recent additions on that front from a cost and burdensome. I mean, some of the operations and farms are relatively small and simplistic in nature, and so being able to have resources to incorporate the overall the administration of the new programs, that piece as it relates to labor, I think is certainly an undue burden to some of our just very traditional family farm operations. And just broadly speaking, as it relates to, and this is not a state issue, so I'll spare us a lot of time on it, but on more of a federal related issue as far as the TN visa program, there's a lot of guest workers that serve farms here in the state of Minnesota, as well as in other industries. But being able to have a streamlined process to ensure that there's those that want to come and work here and do a great job have the ability to do so, and that the farms here that need that help can have access to that resource as well.
Senator Dornick.
Mr. Chair, thank you for that. And then I just wanted to, we had a nice little chat in my office, and you brought your son here, and so appreciate the family farm and just the tradition of that from for years in the past of how important that is. And we want to partnership with you and help you in some of the things that are hurting the farmers. So anyways, we'll continue to work on some of those issues, and it's a pleasure meeting you and your son, and wish you the best. Thank you.
Members, are there questions or comments from Mr. Timmerman, Minnesota Pork? Seeing none, thanks very much for your time and taking the effort to educate us and tell us what's going on, and anything we can do to help, I hope you know we're always available.
Yes, and Chairman, thank you so much for the opportunity. We appreciate it.
Next order of business is the Minnesota soybean growers. Mr. Johnson, if you would, please.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. First off, I would like to thank you all for the opportunity to address you on the state of soy in Minnesota. Good afternoon. My name is Darren Johnson. I'm the president of the Minnesota Soybean Growers. I'm a fourth-generation soybean and corn farmer from Wells, Minnesota. I have a wife and 3 children, which I hope that 1 or 2 will be the 5th generation on our farm. Farming isn't just a business, it's a legacy. It's a commitment passed down through generations, rooted in hard work, innovation, and deep respect for the land. 27,000 farmers like me represent the backbone of rural Minnesota, where communities thrive when agriculture is strong. In 2024, Minnesota soybean farmers faced a mix of challenges and opportunities. Volatile markets, rising input costs, and unpredictable weather patterns tested our resilience. Yet, in the face of those obstacles, our producers continued to deliver in adopting new technologies, improving sustainability practices, and strengthening Minnesota's role as a national leader in soybean production. The strength of Minnesota's soy industry. Minnesota is one of the top soybean producing states in the nation, third to be exact. With over 7 million acres dedicated to soybean production, Minnesota farmers contribute billions of dollars to the state economy. Agriculture contributes 27% of the state's GDP and also makes up less than half of 1% of the state budget, which you guys know well, while supporting thousands of jobs from family farms to processing plants, transportation, and export facilities. Soybeans are more than just a crop. They are a cornerstone of our agriculture industry, fueling global markets, sustaining livestock operations, and driving innovations in biodiesel, renewable products, and sustainable farming practices. Thanks to the resilience and the hard work of our Minnesota farmers, our industry remains strong, but we must recognize and address the challenges we have now and into the future. Challenges facing soybean farmers. First off, market access and trade stability. Minnesota farmers depend on a strong export market, with over 60% of our soybeans headed overseas, and also Minnesota's #1 export. Trade disruptions, tariffs, and global uncertainty make it crucial that we continue expanding market access. We urge state leaders to support policies that strengthen Minnesota's trade relationships and develop new markets for our crops. Infrastructure and transportation. Reliable roads, railways, and waterways are essential for moving our soybeans efficiently and competitively. Investments in rural infrastructure, including highways and river transportation, will keep Minnesota farmers competitive in national and global markets. Sustainable farming and environmental regulations. Minnesota's soybean farmers are stewards of the land, using conservation practices to improve soil health and water quality. We support common sense environmental policies and know that it's not a one-size-fits-all program. Let's work together on solutions that encourage voluntary conservation efforts rather than burdensome regulations. Biodiesel and renewable energy. Minnesota has been a leader in biodiesel with 20% biodiesel blend, B20, that benefits both farmers and consumers. Biodiesel reduces carbon emissions, supports rural economies, and provides a valuable market for our soybeans. Also, sustainable aviation fuel, SAF, and the potential opportunity for soy in the renewable fuels industry. Again, we urge continued support for renewable fuel policies that creates demand for homegrown energy. Farm input costs and economic pressures. Rising input costs from fertilizers to equipment, fuel continue to strain profitability. Access to financial tools, risk management programs, and fair farm policies will be critical in ensuring the long-term success of our family farms. Agriculture is the backbone of Minnesota, and soybean farmers are a driving force in our state's prosperity. But we cannot do this alone. We need policymakers to strengthen trade relationships and market opportunities for Minnesota soybeans, invest in rural infrastructure to keep our supply chain competitive, support sustainable agriculture through voluntary incentive-based conservation programs, expand biodiesel and renewable energy initiatives that benefit our economy and our environment, ensure fair and effective farm policies that keep family farms thriving. Minnesota soybean farmers are innovative, resilient, and committed to feeding and fueling our state and the world. With strong partnerships between farmers, industry leaders, and policymakers, we can ensure that Minnesota remains a leader in agriculture for generations to come. Thank you for your time, your support, and your commitment to Minnesota agriculture. Together we will grow, innovate, and lead. Thank you, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Sometimes we have questions ourselves for our own interest, our own curiosity. Sometimes they're policy-oriented, and sometimes we get questions from members of the community. So I have a question for you from Brad Hovel, and that's, is there any soy in your hair product?
That's a good one. No.
That does actually lead to a genuine question, though, and that's that one of the things I find incredibly fascinating about Minnesota agriculture is how inventive and creative people in these different industries are. So can you tell us a little bit about, maybe is there a new use of soy that you're especially interested and excited about? And clearly you're probably going to say sustainable aviation fuel. But is there anything else that you're thinking about that we should know about that's a novel use of soy?
Really, there's so many things that that are made out of soy. I'm lucky enough to be involved in our county fair, and we actually have the 4-H kids. We donate shirts to them, and it has all of the products, or most of the products that soybeans are made of. So I think there's like 136 different products on that. So yeah, we. Asphalt sealant is one of them. There's a roof sealant, and also firefighting foam would probably be one that would come to mind too, that doesn't have any PFAS in it. So it's much safer for our firefighters. And you guys will be probably hearing more about that product moving ahead, because we are really excited about that one. And of course, SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel. I mean, looking into the future, especially for the state of Minnesota, we are very excited about it.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Members, any other questions? Senator Kunish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony. I am reading a letter from the Minnesota Farmers Union that came out, the Voice of Rural Minnesota, that came out on February 7th, and the MFU president is talking about the tariffs that have been imposed. And as I read this, we've heard about it and we hear more and more, but it states that President Trump has imposed a 10% tariff on China, stayed 30 days, a 25% additional tariff on Canada and Mexico, as well as the Energy Resources of Canada will have an extra 10% tariff. And then it went on to say that nearly half of Minnesota's exports went to Canada and Mexico in 2023, with a total of $10.4 billion, and that's more than 118,000 jobs that are supported by these exports. And so my question for you is, what percent of this is going to affect the soybean economy and our farmers? And then can you give us any insight on what plans are being made, or are you getting any guidance that might give any of you any comfort?
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Johnson.
Yep. Thank you for the question, Senator. As you know, this is all unfolding very quickly. But what's really important for us and us as an association and as soybean farmers and corn farmers and of course the livestock industry is making sure that we're maintaining them relationships. I had the opportunity to get together with a trade team from Saskatchewan that was in Minnesota a week ago. We had a lot of great discussion. That trade relationship has been seamless for 30 plus years between us and Canada. And of course, we're doing everything we can to try and maintain that, because these are friendly trade partners of ours, and obviously with us exporting 60% plus, it's very important. And I think you probably heard that soybeans for the state of Minnesota are our #1 export. So what we are doing in between here is making sure that we are having conversations with the leaders of these different countries and making sure that they know that we truly want to maintain this relationship. As far as the tariffs, we don't have obviously a lot of control over that. There is not a lot that we can do with that. So these are things that we can do. The tariffs are a lever or mechanism that they're able to pull to get trade partners to the table. So for us, it's just about maintaining these relationships. And yeah, of course, it could dramatically affect our prices, as we saw in the last trade war that we had with China. So we know that there's a trade deficit and that we're trying to bring that together. But unfortunately, a lot of times that falls on agriculture's back.
Senator Kunish.
So while you were talking, I'm thinking like, what can we do to help or alleviate this issue? So, if you have a soybean crop and you're not able to ship it, it's going to rot in the ground or perhaps where you store it. But are there any other crops or other products that soybean growers could quickly or nimbly switch to that would have less of an exporting effect, that wouldn't be so much affected to tariffs? Or is that just like, it's not that easy to do?
Well, I would like to say that it would be that easy. Unfortunately, it's not. There's different options out there. Camelina, pennycress. There's a lot of different options out there potentially for oil crops in the future. Soybeans right now are, especially if you're talking SAF or biodiesel, it's a drop-in fuel. It's ready to go. Looking forward, there is potential for that. The cost of it is very tough because, as you know, I mean, in order for us to change any type of equipment out, just a planter alone, a planter alone is, anywhere from $300,000 to $400,000 now for a planter. If you were to go out and purchase a brand new combine with 2 heads for harvesting, plus potentially if you had a different crop, you may have to have another head for that. You're talking $1 million+ dollars. We're in a situation right now, we are about $1 below on soybeans on our cost of production. So it's about $1 below what we would be selling for cash today, what it's costing us to produce them. So for us, it's about trying to create more domestic demand and use. Especially if we do get into times like this, we do have more domestic usage available.
Senator Kunish? Senator Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Johnson, you mentioned in your testimony that you're concerned about burdensome regulations, things that have been put in place maybe on the state level or on the federal level that may be some regulations that you are wanting to get rid of or trying to persuade us to change. Could you outline some of those?
Well, I guess the first one that would come to mind would be, with per discussions with Senator Dornick, would be safe and sick on the farm. 97% of farms in the U.S. are family farms. So most of the time you're working alongside me. I'm working alongside with my uncle, my cousin, and also my children at times. So it's mostly all family. We do have some employees, but we are able to manage that with our employees. So it's just another level of management that we have to deal with on the farm. And as far as them being able to take them days off or that potential family leave, which we have no problem. I mean, if there's any need for that, we have absolutely no problem giving that to them. But unfortunately, I think it could possibly be taken advantage of, and I don't think it would be in our situation. So that's definitely one thing that is concerning us.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Mr. Johnson, what about in the area of growing your crop? Are there rules and regulations that stifle you from, or are there things that prevent you from planting, or things that you can only do that, you have to have guidance or permission from local authorities or from the state or whatever?
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, of course. I mean, we're very regulated, as you guys probably know. And one thing that comes to mind is as we move forward, farmers are very conservation minded. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for us is, we're multi-generational. Our farms, in most cases, have been in our families for hundreds of years, potentially. So we're very conservation minded, and there's conservation practices that have been used for a very long time on some of these farms, and they work very well. Conservation practices are not a one-size-fits-all. What will work on one farm in one county or even a township will not work on the other one. So that's something that we need to pay attention to moving forward, because there just is no comprehensive plan that can overlay everything. That conservation fits everything, especially as we move forward, with SAF.
Senator.
Thank you. So it sounds like some of the guidelines that were sent down by the state in regarding conservation is a one-size-fits-all, and you're saying it doesn't do that, and I agree with you.
Yeah.
Coming from a farm myself, it doesn't fit my soil type because I have basically sandy soil. But if I go to maybe southern Minnesota or western Minnesota, they have heavy soil, and heavy soil will retain water. And according to some guidelines, you have a lake in the middle of your field, and that's not true. But because of the heavy moisture or the weather problem, it for 3-4 days stands there. And so I appreciate all the hard work that farmers do. Thank you for your testimony, and hopefully we can do all we can to make your lives better.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Dornick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Johnson. And just the resilience and the American farmer and the obstacles you mentioned and the things you have to put up with in preparing for the crop, as far as, the input cost, the price of the crop, weather, and as you plant, and all of these things that you guys face year in, year out, and just the ups and downs of the business of the American farmer, and your fact of 27% of the GDP is produced by farmers. That's amazing. So thank you for your work. And then only having 0.5% of the budget in ag, Mr. Chair, maybe we need to do something about that. So I don't really have a question. I just wanted to thank you and all the farmers in the room and what you guys do. It's truly amazing. And the family tradition that you have is so wonderful. You can raise your kids and teach your kids, and they can choose to stay on the farm, and many do, and some don't. But it's always been great to visit with you, and the opportunity I had to visit your farm, some of your family, and well done. Thank you.
Members, other questions or comments? Mr. Johnson. Thanks very much for hanging out. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much.
Members, our next order of business is Senate File 1552, Senator Kupec's financial reporting requirements for grain buyers modifications. For your awareness, I will be asking for a vote at the conclusion of this presentation to send this bill directly to the floor. Senator Kupec, to your bill, if you would, please.
Thank you, Senator Putnam. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm glad to present Senate File 1552, which is an update on financial reporting requirements for grain buyers. Hope you can earn your support for this proposal because, well, this committee passed this proposal last year. In fact, the entire Senate approved this last session when it was brought forward in MDA's policy bill, and then passed as part of our supplemental agriculture omnibus. Unfortunately, it did not wind up in the final conference agreement. I'm carrying this bill as a standalone this year with the hope that we can make this change quickly to make life easier for some of the small grain buyers in our state. I'll take a couple of minutes here to talk about a few changes to the bill. First, MDA regulates the purchase of grain in our state because much like a bank, grain buyers are moving large amounts of grain and risky financial decisions could have devastating consequences on farmers. However, if a grain buyer is purchasing a small amount of grain, under $1 million annually, and paying in cash upon delivery, that does not pose the same risk. This clarifies an exemption for cash sales to small grain buyers, while also clarifying that MDA can require additional reporting if necessary. Second, for grain buyers under $7.5 million in annual gross purchases, this gives them the flexibility to provide MDA a financial report prepared either by an accountant instead of a CPA. This is a challenge that we talked about on Monday when Tom Smoody was here, when I asked him about his experience with our grain licensing program. He's going to need to find a CPA, which isn't always easy in rural Minnesota, and he'll pay about $7,000 to get that report done. For those above $7.5 million, a CPA must at least review their statement. And for buyers above $20 million in gross purchases, that's a lot of money, so they'll still be required to get a CPA to check everything out. In all of this, MDA not only considered feedback from their grain advisory group, made up of grain buyers, farmers, and others, but also compared our laws to others around the country. I think it's important that we do this bill for two reasons. First, it's taking common sense steps and regulations on small business that the agency says are necessary. And second, I think it's also important because these are exactly the kind of businesses we're so often working to support on this committee. Last week, we heard a fantastic presentation from the folks at the University of Minnesota working to commercialize winter annual perennial crops. If farmers are going to be able to grow these crops, or others like oats or sunflowers, diversifying our landscape, adding more income streams to their business, they'll benefit from new small grain buyers who want to partner with them. And this is one small change we can do to support these businesses.
Thank you, Senator Kupec. Would our testifiers please all come to the desk at the same time? So Mr. Falk, Mr. Story, Ms. Lemke, we have 3 chairs up here. Feel free to have a seat. Mr. Falk, you're first on our list, so if you would, please state your full name for the record and commence your testimony when you're ready.
Jim Falk, I'm here with testifying for Minnesota Farmers Union. Chair Putnam and members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to testify before the committee today in support of Senate File 1552. I'm Jim Falk, the 4th generation to operate our family farm in Swift County, and I farm with my wife Karen and my son Andrew. I'm also the president of Falk Seed Farm, Inc., a seed processing facility in Swift County. And in 2025, that marks our 40th year in business. So I've been a licensed grain buyer in Minnesota for approximately 25 years. It might even be 30. Even though most of our business is related to seed production and seed processing, we are a seed cleaning facility, and we have the equipment that is often utilized to clean raw grains into a more refined final product that can be then used in a food processing facility. We're not a typical commercial grain buyer, as we only work with a few specialty crops and we never buy commercial grain or provide commercial storage. The changes in the reporting requirements for grain buyers in Minnesota in 2019 threw a lot of us that are small operators like mine under the same umbrella as a typical commodity grain elevator and into the required financial review. My financial review over the last couple of years has cost our business about $7,000 a year. I just received my engagement letter from my accounting firm that's going to be doing my review for MDA this year, and it will be $7,400. To be clear, my tax report has already been completed by my accountant, and this is a review of the same information. A little bit more in depth, I understand that, but basically the information is another set of eyes on that same information. I've been a member of MDA's Grain Advisory Group for the last few years, and I participated in the discussion about how the reporting changes in 2019 negatively affected small grain buyers. During my time as a licensed grain buyer, the annual reporting has generally been some sort of financial data, purchase reports, and at times a compilation of my tax report that my accountant could prepare for a fraction of the cost of a review. Again, MDA is still getting my information. The strict reporting established in 2019 wasn't effective. It didn't prevent failures or adequately protect farmers, which is, of course, what one would have to assume the statute should be doing. The Grain Indemnity Fund or account was established, farmers are protected, and MDA will still collect the financial data from grain buyers. MDA's staff is professional. They provided the committee with a great deal of information, allowed for open discussion and ideas, researched what other states do, and have made the recommendations for the changes in the reporting that are in Senate File 1552. I'm very much in support of this bill, and I hope that you will all support the recommendations of the qualified staff at MDA. In addition, I want to thank the senators that have signed on in support of this bill. I had a very good conversation with Senator Westrom, who's my senator, who signed on to the bill. So I'm grateful to see such strong bipartisan support. Thank you again for allowing me to testify today.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Mr. Story, if you would please state your full name for the record and commence your testimony when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. For the record, my name is Donovan Story. I'd just like to share with you what my small business has been facing in the state. To start off, just a quick introduction. I'm 30 years old. I have a young family of 5 with another one on the way. Our little family owns a small business in our small town of Barnesville, Minnesota. This business is called the Feed Mill Incorporated. I'm lucky to have and lead 4 employees. Together, our little team serves about 500 customers. And most of these customers rely on us daily for their animal food supply. This is something I'm passionate about. My employees and our customers make up a big family of its own, and it revolves entirely around agriculture, specifically raising and feeding animals. Among many other things, our primary job at the mill is to create and provide animal food and supplements to our customers, consulting with them when needed and providing the right products at the right time to ensure efficiency and resilience in every operation, whether it's big or small. To do this, we first have to manufacture the products, and to do that, we have to bring in a lot of different ingredients. A couple of these ingredients are grain. In order to buy grain in Minnesota, you have to get the grain buyer's license. This is something I'm well aware of. Every year, at the end of June, we renew our grain buyer's license. This being just one of the many licenses we have to renew every year. I do need to stop and clarify here. At the feed mill, we do not store anybody's grain. All grain is brought in one load at a time. It's paid for immediately, and it's used exclusively as an ingredient for animal food. This grain that we purchase has an annual average of $500,000. Back to the license renewal. Like every other year, I proceeded this year with the same steps outlined by MDA. These include paying the license fee, paying the exam fee, paying for our $100,000 grain bond, and paying our accountant to supply us financial review to MDA. I'd like to add that our accountant is a reputable local agency. They have multiple employees, and 2 registered tax return preparers. This year, our grain license renewal was denied. For some reason this year, the financial review from our accountant wasn't good enough. And I was told it wasn't good enough because it wasn't from a CPA, a certified public accountant. I couldn't understand it right away. Nothing changed in the legislation. Nothing changed in the amount of grain we purchased. It was really frustrating, but I guess I learned early on in this business to be very good at 2 things. 1 was keeping my customers happy, and 2 was solving problems. I looked at it like just another obstacle, certified public accountant. How hard could it be? And it turns out it's really hard. A business like mine can't come into these agencies as an outsider and request something like this. After 5 months, I had so many refusals from so many agencies, I actually lost count. It was surprising and it was discouraging. In December, I finally found one CPA from Wisconsin who was willing to do this review. And things were looking up, but it was pretty short-lived, as a couple weeks in, the CPA informed me that it was going to cost $18,000. To go from an expense that was costing $500 to $18,000 is disproportionate to the size of my business, and it's disproportionate to the number of customers that I have to pass that cost on to. On our best year, we're lucky to make that kind of profit, and if we do, we need it for repairs and maintenance and upgrades. For some reason, everything about the CPA version of a financial review has been difficult, including finding financing for it. During this process, of course, I reached out to MDA. Everyone I was able to reach at MDA expressed their mutual resentment for the statute. However, the overwhelming response was, "This is how it is." On January 23rd, we received a cease and desist order. I didn't have the CPE review that the order was demanding, and I can't explain to 10,000 animals what a cease and desist order is, so I had no choice but to appeal it. I don't exactly know what that means. I'm in a daunting place right now, and I don't know what the future holds. But I cannot let this be the obstacle that fails our customers. They are the whole reason I purchased this business. 4 years ago, my boss at the time was in a near fatal car accident. I was basically forced to step up and fill both of our positions. Within a couple months, it became apparent that he wasn't going to be able to come back to the business. And we didn't have any prospective buyers for the business. Having worked here for years, I had firsthand knowledge of just how critical the mill was to so many farm families. I was on a first-name basis with each of them, and I couldn't just walk away. This is why I'm here. Right now, as we speak at this time of day, my guys are back home and they're working in sub-zero temps to load a feed truck with 8 ton of a custom beef formula. And that truck is going in the morning to a local farm, and that local farm is raising specifically raising animals to provide protein to a local school. This is just one example that's happening today. I need to bring into perspective how important small businesses like mine are in Minnesota. We have a huge impact on the local food supply. Over half our customers are backyard operations, and that's something I'm really proud of. They raise and feed an amazing diversity of crops and animals, and they rely on us for more than just feed. Advice, direction, sometimes just sympathy. Things they can't get from a big box store or a big franchise. Many of the businesses like mine are too small to even be seen, but right now we're being categorized among all the giants. Applying this same financial requirement to all grain buyers it's unfair and it's unjust. Senator Kupec's bill can resolve this issue, and I ask that you give it your full attention. Businesses like mine we need room to do what we do best, and we need room to grow. Thank you, Chair, members. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Story. Ms. Lemke, if you would, please state your full name for the record and commence your testimony when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair Putnam and committee members. My name is Laura Lemke. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Grain and Feed Association. We are a 118-year-old nonprofit membership-based organization that represents the interests of the grain and feed industry in the state. I'm here to testify in Senate File 1552, which contains portions we both support and oppose, or at least we have concerns about. MGFA supports the following: the change in threshold reporting to a tiered approach. For the last several years, MGFA has fielded calls from members who have had difficulty complying with the financial reporting requirements due to the small number of auditing firms that work with grain facilities and the high cost of obtaining reviewed and audited financial statements. We also support the exemption of cash grain buyers under $1 million in gross annual purchases from the financial reporting requirement. However, we are concerned about the change in language from generally accepted accounting principles to national or international accounting standards because of the increased range and type of financial statements that will be allowable under the statute. This means that from licensee to licensee, MDA will no longer collect the same uniform financial information. Instead, they may receive financials prepared on a tax basis, cash basis, or an accrual basis, all of which differ from each other. With a limited MDA staff alone bearing the responsibility to adequately monitor and evaluate the financial integrity of more than 300 licensees each year, we question the outcome this change will bring. MGFA also does not support eliminating the CEO and board certification of a licensee's financial statement. The board of directors has a fiduciary responsibility to its members, and as such, should be willing and able to attest to the accuracy of their financial statement. In addition, when the Ashby elevator failure occurred, as I remember it, many patrons were upset that their board of directors failed them in a variety of ways, not least was through their fiduciary duty to the cooperative's members who took heavy losses. So I believe the section was put into the statute to make the CEOs and boards accountable. By removing it from the statute, is this no longer important? It should be noted that more than a decade ago, grain licensees used to submit their financials to MDA annually. At some point, MDA, as I recall, requested that licensees no longer send those to the state because the bonding companies were reviewing the financials, and MDA didn't have the staff to review them anyway, so we stopped sending financials to the state. Essentially, this bill proposes we go back to the way things were, but this time bonding companies, with their skilled underwriters, are no longer involved in reviewing the financial reports. Instead, MDA's small staff will be shouldering the responsibility to monitor the financial integrity of the state's grain industry each year, and now we have a grain indemnity fund to fall back on if a grain buyer becomes insolvent. Since the Ashby elevator failure in 2018, MGFA has been in conversations with legislative leaders and the Department of Agriculture about how best to make the grain industry accountable and ensure financial stability for their customers, without many of our suggestions being taken into account or put into practice. At this point, it feels like we've come full circle by continuing to walk back the provisions and regulatory oversight the legislature put into place in recent years. We in the grain industry would simply like to reach a level of stability without modifications to the statutes every year that we must continually adjust to. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lemke. I do want to say, Mr. Story in particular, and Mr. Falk as well, we hear the difficulty that you're feeling right now. And that's part of why we're talking about this right now, to take care of this as quickly as we possibly can. As Senator Kupec mentioned, this body and this committee passed this through. We wanted this to be the way that the bill mattered the first time through. But unfortunately, the other body took a different perspective on it. So I appreciate you coming back, Mr. Falk, again, and I appreciate you being here, Mr. Story, to tell your experiences with the work that we tried to do last session for this modification, and why it's so important. Members, do we have questions or comments for any of the testifiers? Senator Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Story, we're on 1.9. It says that the language has been canceled for generally accepted accounting principles and put in national and international accounting standards. Would you like that other language reinstated rather than the new language that's in there?
Mr. Story.
Thank you, Chair. Senator, I honestly can't say I know the difference between generally accepted accounting principles and national and international accepted accounting principles. Whichever one I could be supplied by my own accountant would be acceptable to my business and many like mine.
So, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Anderson? Senator Anderson. Sorry.
Mr. Story, right now, though, you've been told you have to get a CPA, and prior to that, you didn't have to have a CPA, which I would guess, my son's a CPA, but I'm not. But I'm guessing that general accounting practices would meet the standard of a CPA. I'm not, like I said, I'm not up on all that, but I would guess that what you were doing before, unless there was something cited in the way your accountants were doing and taking care of your books and your financials, everything was going okay until all of a sudden the law was changed. Am I correct in saying that?
Mr. Story?
Chair, Senator, everything was going okay, and there was no change. There was no issue with my financial review. There was actually no change in the law. I'd received my grain buyer's license for the previous 3 years under the same legislation. Yeah.
Senator Anderson?
Maybe some of the other panel the testifiers could answer that question about standards. Ms. Lemke, you have any thoughts on the accounting standards that are being required?
Ms. Lemke?
Chair Putnam and Senator Anderson, I am not a CPA myself, so I'm not sure how qualified I feel on this. My understanding is that with the generally accepted accounting principles that you're looking at your CPA reviews or audits, and they, there is a peer review that they need to go through themselves. That makes it a higher level look at a business's financials. Our issue with switching to national or international accounting standards, my understanding again is that generally accepted accounting principles would fall under the national standards, but being that we're opening it up, that also means that tax-based accounting can be accepted and cash-based accounting can be accepted along with accrual-based accounting. And they're all different. Tax-based accounting versus cash-based accounting, I looked this up, guys. The key difference lies in when income and expenses are recognized. So if you are having a review or an audit done, you've got a certain period of time that's being looked at. When you're doing cash or tax-based accounting, maybe cash isn't received within that window of time, so it could be pushed off to another year. I understand farmers do this a lot so that they can push income off to another year so they are regulating their income. That is my very base level accounting information, guys.
Thank you for your effort, Ms. Lemke. It's very much appreciated. Mr. Fogg?
So I've had 4 reviews already. And so being part of the grant advisory group and the discussions that were taking place, there was a window of time where they were, this is my opinion, but you can ask the staff at MDA, but my understanding is they gave some grace period in time for people to get into compliance. And that might be what the other testifier there had gotten some leeway there at that point in time. I don't know that for sure. But in addition to your question about CPAs and regular accounting, my tax accountant isn't qualified and won't be able to do this type of review and audit. They pick and choose whether they're going to do tax or different types of business accounting. And it takes a lot of staff and it takes a lot of expertise for these firms to have the type of staff available to work on a project for a big firm that might take a month, might take 2 months. And so what you're really throwing these small businesses into is a situation where they're typically not having that much activity that they should have to be going into the type of accounting that is required in a review or an audit, when basically much of this information is already done. They ask interviews, I get calls and questions. It takes time. It's not just money, it takes time. Once they've done my project my business doesn't change that much. Once they've done my project for 3 or 4 years, I asked them this year, didn't you think the price should come down? you've got my business figured out. I'm dealing with the same people, you know. If you guys want to investigate why it costs so much to do these audits, there's a place to go. Really, I asked, how many hours does it take you to do this if in fact you already know everything about my business? Well, we have to go through these procedures, and we have to do these questions, and we have to do this documentation. And so this is why we're here today, because MDA has determined that much of this is not really practical for the smallest grain buyers. And it wasn't something that they demanded before. There's been numerous times when we went through history through the Grain Advisory Group. There was one of the sessions where they talked about the history. We've been on and off again on different reporting. There's been times when there's been no reporting. Once again, we had reporting. Then, as Laura Lemke here indicated, that then we went off reporting. Now we're back on to the most stringent reporting that we've ever had. And it doesn't solve problems. It didn't solve problems. We still had failures. So, I don't know, maybe I confused people more than I answered the question, but I think we need to trust the people at MDA. They put the time and effort into it. They're professionals. They work with it, and they've made the recommendation. And so I would hope that we would put some faith in what they put forward in this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. That was helpful. We do actually, I've been looking around the room to see if there's a friend we can phone to help us with this one. And we do have some friends in the Department of Agriculture here. If you're feeling like helping us out a little bit, I'm looking at you, Peter. If you could, Mr. Chestnut, state your full name for the record and commence your testimony when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Peter Chestnut. I'm one of the assistant commissioners at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. I think before we get into some of the details, I just want to thank Senator Kupec, you, Mr. Chair, this committee for passing this language last session. I know that it was our intent and the intent of this body to avoid situations like Mr. Story's here with this legislation, and I think his testimony just highlights the need for this legislation to go to the floor and get enacted as soon as possible. But for the technical questions, I'm going to defer to my colleague, Mr. Nicholas Malinowski.
Mr. Malinowski, if you'll please state your full name for the record and commence your testimony when you're ready.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Nick Malinowski. I'm the program manager for the Fruit, Vegetable, and Grain Program at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture.
I think we have a question. I'm not sure that I can phrase it appropriately. Can I outsource that to someone else as well? Senator Kunish?
So could you just explain, I'm very confused. What is the necessity for an international accounting standard to be added to this? What value does that add? Does it lessen the complication of all of this? Does it add to it? Can you just explain really and truly why we need an international standard for accounting for these farmers?
Thank you, Senator Kunish. Mr. Malinowski.
Mr. Chair and Senator Kunish, the reason that it is national or international standard is we have businesses licensed with our program that operate out of Canada. They operate out of the Netherlands. They have their headquarters based there, and so but they're purchasing Minnesota grain. And so we need to recognize that the nature of grain buyers in Minnesota isn't, while they may be purchasing here in the state, their headquarters and their financial reporting responsibilities exist outside of the state as well. Ultimately, this law is written so that when we are evaluating financial positions and reviewing financial statements, we are comparing the previous years to the current year for each entity individually. We aren't comparing the large buyers, the multi-billion-dollar companies of the world, to the small companies that you heard from today. We are comparing them to themselves so that we can evaluate their financial position and ensure that there aren't major changes from year to year that would impact their ability to pay growers and farmers that are selling their grain.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. That was incredibly helpful. Senator Kunish? Senator Anderson?
Thank you. So I didn't catch your last name.
Milanowski.
Okay, the SKI, I understand. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Anderson?
Mr. Malakowski, is the general, will this bill help Mr. Story in the fact that he will not have to pay $18,000 for a CPA to come in and do his accountants, which he's basically now in a standstill, or he's in a catch-22. He can't do anything. So I'm asking, how is this bill going to help him?
Mr. Malinowski?
So this, Mr. Chair and Senator Anderson, this bill will allow for anyone to submit a financial report to our office that contains what's listed starting at 1.11 through 1.16 so that we can evaluate their financial position. This would give each entity the freedom to choose the financial report that they want to file with our office as long as they include those items in those lines. And so in many cases, that will mean a much cheaper and readily available financial report.
So, Mr. Malinowski, that's a yes, basically, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Senator Dames?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Kupec, can you tell me, is this an agency bill?
Senator Kupec?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this comes, my memory serves, this comes out of the grain buyers working group that they came through, and that, yes, this did come from MDA.
Thank you.
Senator Dames?
Thank you.
Members, Senator Dornick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we definitely want to fix this. Mr. Story, your story is very sad, compelling, and I can see it in your face, the stress that you're dealing with. And so we want to fix this. And Mr. Falk, for our fourth generation, I just appreciate, I like always hearing that, and we want to get that cost down for you so you can do business and not be tied to, or I mean, drugged down by this financial burden. But I wanted to see if I could have Ms. Lemke come back up, and then I'm on the bill, and I thought there was peace in the valley, so I got to find out what, there's a few moving parts. We don't want to have unintended consequences. So I did have one question for you, Commissioner, first, if that's okay. So you guys are going to do the examining of the financials. So I was just wondering if you guys, the department, would be willing to incorporate the Office of Inspector General, auxiliary powers and public tips into the grain buyer and grain warehouse licensing program to help oversee this?
Mr. Chesed.
Mr. Chair, Senator Dornick, yes, that is certainly something we are willing to consider and work on with folks. We'd love to work on the language with Senator Kupec and yourself. We've been discussing that very issue with some of the stakeholders that have approached us about it, so it's something that we as a department would be happy to work with folks on.
Senator Dornick.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Thank you for that answer. And so just Ms. Lemke, just want to, maybe you can get the bill a little bit, and I know you support and want to do the same thing. You want to help these problems here that we need to fix. But we don't want unintended consequences. So can you run through them a little bit more? We're trying to catch up here as, because like I said, I thought there was peace in the valley on this bill. So just some of the spots that maybe need to be fixed or tweaked.
Ms. Lemke, I'm going to ask you to do that efficiently if you could, because we're running out of time.
Yes, Chair Putnam and Senator Dornick. Quickly, so our concerns are, again, the intent of the legislation that we've been working on and reworking on for the last 5, 6, 7 years has been to put more stringent financial responsibility, if you will, on the industry. And we're relaxing it, and we're relaxing it, and we're relaxing it. And we're getting back to that point where we're kind of right back where we began. And Ashby Elevator was a huge fraudulent situation. And we're walking back everything again. So we're just kind of stuck on what are we doing here? The other issue, as I had mentioned before, was the CEO and board certification of financial reports. With many cooperatives, larger cooperatives, they are having their financials done. They're having audits done annually. That report is brought back to the board of directors. They have to agree on it anyway and look it over, make sure that everything looks right, and then present that to their own cooperative members at their annual meetings. Why is the state no longer interested in having them certify those reports? I'm confused by that. Those are our two biggest issues with this.
Senator Dornick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so, Senator Kupec, we're going to maybe tweak this. Does it need, in your opinion, are you ready or open to some maybe possible adjustments? I'd like to at least
Senator Dornick, remember, just quickly to recall, this was the position of this committee last session. This bill has gone through this committee prior and has passed through the entire Senate as well. Our ambition is to take this to the floor after a vote. On the floor, obviously, it'll be available for amendment and other points of discussion. Senator Kupec can engage in those conversations as well. But I do just want to remind us that this was the position of the committee prior.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Kupec, I'm sorry, if you'd like to answer.
No, I would agree with that. I think, this is also something that the grain buyers kind of work group has worked on for quite a while, and this is kind of the product that's come out of that. And I think as we've seen, the lack of action on this last year has led to, putting Mr. Story here in an uncomfortable situation because we went through this. So, I mean, my goal would be to act quicker on this for people like Mr. Story to give them some ease and work through this quicker. If there are other modifications that we'd want to come back to even on a separate piece of legislation and work on that, I'm completely amenable to doing that.
Senator Dames.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I assume this is going to be passed off today and go straight to the floor?
That is our ambition, Senator.
So Senator Kupec, are you willing to get some amendments ready and work with both sides to get this corrected so when you come to the floor you can put an amendment on it and we get it right? Typically I'd ask to have it tabled and do it now, but under the circumstances where we have a lot of things that we need to move this forward in a rather fast fashion, would you be willing to do that and have this so when we hit to the floor, it comes to the floor, we pass it out and it's what we want it to be, and that we got some peace in the valley on this?
Sure. Well,
Senator Kupec?
Sure. I mean, I would be happy to work on that. I also want to make sure that we include the members of the other body that are carrying this. Talked with the chair over there, and he also is on a path to move this rather quickly over there and also move it out onto the floor onto the House. So.
And I would, again, remind us that this is in no sense reckless. It's not that this has not undergone due consideration for a very long time. We are not trying to expedite this for any sort of nefarious reason or to neglect proper consideration that has already been done. As I said before, this bill has gone through this body before and was accepted before. So we are not hurrying anything, but we are attending to Mr. Story's story and to Mr. Falk's story, and the need to provide then a return to what we initially passed to make their lives a little bit easier. Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hadn't heard that there was a bill moving in the House, and I'm just wondering if that's had a hearing. What is the bill and who's carrying it, I guess?
Senator Kupec?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Representative Anderson is carrying the bill in the House, and I believe they've got a number on it, and I believe they're working on scheduling a hearing.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Members, any other questions or comments? You're right. Senator Kupec, your final comments before we vote?
Sure. No, I would like to thank Senator Dornick, Senator Westrom, and you as well, Senator Putnam, for signing on to this bill. And if we all want to, I would say, convene in a room and have a discussion, certainly before this goes out onto the floor to alleviate any concerns you might have about it or any other possible changes, I'm happy to do that. But I think for the case of people like Mr. Story, who I'd also really like to thank on fairly short notice, I offered him the Zoom option, and, you know, it is a long drive down from Barnesville, and he made the trip down because he thought that this was important, and I think his testimony was very compelling. So I'm really happy to have him here beside me today. So for his sake and all the other small companies out there, I'd like to do the best we can at moving this through quickly.
Thank you, Senator Kupec. Senator Gustafson moves that Senate File 1552 be passed and moved to the floor. All in favor? Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Senate File 1552 has been passed and moved to the floor. Thank you, Senator Kupec. Thank you, members, for the discussion. Folks, we do have one bill left. Senator Gustafson's 1559 Farm to School and Early Care Programs appropriation. I apologize, folks. We have 3 testifiers. Love to hear from all of you. But I'm going to have to ask you to be efficient if you could, please, because we've got about 20 minutes left. Senator Gustafson, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill supports kids and farmers, so hopefully we'll have unanimous support. Senate File 1559 allocates general fund dollars to the Commissioner of Agriculture to bolster the Farm to School and Early Care program. This program promotes healthy food options, benefits children, farmers, local communities. While I'm proud of the positive impact of free school meals across the state, I believe that we can do more. Providing children with fresh, nutritious food is essential for their well-being, supports positive educational and health outcomes, and supports our local farmers. This program strengthens the connection between schools and their communities. Farm to School offers farmers a reliable market for their products, while schools and early childhood care centers benefit from reducing shipping costs and easier access to fresh local foods. Furthermore, a study of previous Farm to School grants found that every dollar invested generates an additional dollar of economic activity. Senate File 1559 will link farmers to their local economies and ensure that the food served in schools is healthy and nourishing. Testifying today are Samantha Barthel from Snake River Farm, Brenda Rudolph of Raising a Farmer, and Lorianne L. Landowski, who is the Director of Child Nutrition in Foley Public Schools. They will be able to give further information and speak to the advantages of the program. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Ms. Barthel, Ms. Rudolph, Ms. Landowski, come on down. Ms. Barthel, if you could, please, give us your full name for the record. Grant testimony when you're ready.
Sure. Hello, Chairman Putnam and members of the committee. My name is Samantha Bartle. I'm from the Snake River Farm. We're based out of Sherburne County, and we're a third-generation regenerative farm. We pasture raise and finish bison, cattle, hogs, and lambs. The bulk of our business is direct-to-consumer sales, where we supply 600 Minnesota families with protein. And this is our second year with the Farm to School program, so far supplying 10,000 pounds of extremely high quality, nutrient-dense ground beef. And what makes it so nutritious is that we're providing the whole animal. So unlike our direct-to-consumer sales, where a customer will get a quarter and they'll get their cuts and their steaks and their roast, and then trim goes to ground, these kids are getting the whole animal. So it's providing the maximum nutritional benefit possible, which is so important considering who's consuming it. And they need this for healthy bone and brain development and brain function. And this is something that these kids might not be getting outside of school. So we're very proud to be able to supply it. So since we're supplying local schools, a lot of these children have been to our farm, or they are related to people who have worked on our farm, and in a few special cases, they even work on our farm. So this program is teaching kids about where their meat comes from and the importance of knowing that, as well as inspiring future farmers and mindful consumers. So we like to keep things local as well by working with other small family businesses. We have not one but 2 local processors we work with. And from a financial standpoint, the program is an important addition to our year-round farming operation because although we don't make much profit off of it, we're able to cover our costs during our off-season. In the past, we'd have to let off certain employees seasonally, but now we can keep them on year-round. And I'm sure any business owner can appreciate the value of having a program and being able to plan, which we try to do in agriculture and so frequently fail. So it's nice to have something that you can actually rely on. So this program is benefiting Minnesota children, small farms, local processors. There's even the environmental factor of having all these grazing animals, eating diverse native grasses, and the microorganisms consuming their waste and improving our soil and water quality and water retention, which is important considering our current climate uncertainty. And that's all. Thank you.
That's good. Thank you very much, Ms. Bartle. Ms. Rudolph, will you please state your full name for the record and commence testimony when you're ready?
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Brenda Rudolph. I farm outside of Little Falls. I brought my family, Nathan, my husband, and my two kids. My two kids are sixth generation on our farm. It's been in Nathan's family for over 130 years. We transitioned our farm from a dairy farm in 2019 to a direct market farm. We work with food hubs, schools, restaurants, direct market at farmers market. It's just us four. The farm to school program is essential. It helps our rural economy, where the infrastructure that Minnesota has placed into local meat processing that allows farmers to access markets to schools. When we have Farm to School Month, we have a table with our Little Falls Farmers Market. I'm the president also of our farmers market, and we offer egg education classes to have that relationship for it. Our kids get to eat meat that they raised on our farm in their school, which is pretty amazing. The logistics of it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of relationships that Lori will discuss more about, that we have a really close relationship with our food services, because we're menu planning now of the meats that we're having to process for fall, because that we have to have that capacity and to be able to do that. So it takes a really good working relationship, and it takes a special person to implement farm to school in food service. And so, Lori.
Ms. Landowski, if you'll please state your full name for the record and commence your testimony when you're ready.
I'm Lori Landowski, Child Nutrition Director for Foley Public Schools, ISD 5-1. We serve around 980 breakfasts a day and 1,650 lunches per day. I'm here to testify in support of the Senate File 1995 as a school district that has greatly benefited from the program and otherwise would not be able to support Minnesota farmers at the scale we do without these grants. By fully receiving these grants, both farm to school and equipment grants, we have been able to purchase new equipment that will allow us to process and prepare foods that we get from our local farmers. Being a rural community is very important for us to use and support our local farmers and community partners. We work very closely with our farmers to let them know what our needs are and our expectations. So it's a win-win situation for both. Some of the local items we purchase are local beef from our FFA students, fresh fruits and vegetables, whole wheat flour, fresh maple syrup, and fresh greens. This is so important because better food for kids leads for a healthier generation in our students. We believe that scratch cooking is vital in making our menus healthier for our students. Our school gardens allow us to have fresh herbs year-round for our scratch cooking. We pick, clean, freeze them so we have the opportunity to use them throughout our menu throughout the school year. We also work very closely with 2 local farmers and our egg teacher to plant and grow sweet corn over the summer. This allows us to have fresh sweet corn for our lunches in the fall. It's planted in late June, so it's ready for the school year. Our egg class goes out into the field with us, helps pick the corn from our 1.5-acre plot. They will count the cobs and do soil testing as part of their curriculum experience. It is a great thing to work with our students while having great conversation while shucking the corn with them. Having students know where their food comes from is very important to us, and they take great pride in knowing that they can help us out. Children who participate in farm-to-school activities are more likely to eat a wide variety of foods and are more willing to try new foods. They also eat additional servings of fruits and vegetables each day. So this is why I'm here today to share why it's so important to continue these farm-to-school grants. You have going around some photos that we wanted to share with you today. This shows how active we have been in our Farm to School program and how we take pride and how the students take pride and joy in what they get to eat each day and the nutrition that the kids get to have, and it's so important for them. Thank you so much for your time and support.
Thank you, Ms. Landowski. Members, do we have questions for our testifiers? Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see in the bill here, it shows $150,000 to a statewide coordinator. Has there been a statewide coordinator in the past, Senator Gustafson?
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Anderson. I had to check, and yes, 2 years ago, we passed that to put that in place, and it was because we were expanding the program, and it was nice to have one person that could coordinate the logistics of all of it, especially knowing that it was statewide.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Anderson.
Senator Gustafson, who is that coordinator?
Senator Gustafson.
Yep, Mr. Chair, I believe they are here, so I will let them introduce themselves to you.
There's a visual aid, Senator Anderson.
Yeah.
Could you please state your full name for the record and commence your testimony when you're ready?
Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Bress. I work as the Assistant Director of Ag Marketing and Development at the Department of Agriculture. Mr. Chair, Senator Anderson, unfortunately, I am not Kate Siebold. I wish that Kate could be here with us today, but she has been employed as our Farm to School our farm to institution coordinator for about the last 2 years. Prior to coming to the MDA, she was the farm to school coordinator at Minneapolis Public Schools, and is just a wealth of knowledge and a great resource for schools across the state.
Okay.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question, it says down in Part C of the bill, it says the commissioner may use an amount of state funds equal to no more than 7.5% of the federal funds. So in my understanding that they can use up to 7.5% of federal funds and 7.5% of state funds for whatever the commissioner wants to use it for? I don't see where it says it's going to be used for specifically anything except that they get to take that, they may take that out of the money that we give them at the state and then out of whatever comes in from the federal level.
Ms. Bress?
Yeah. Mr. Chair, Senator Anderson, this is new language this year that we have a one-time, or maybe this is a second-time opportunity to receive some CCC, some commodity credit corporation funding from the USDA that would be specifically for farm to school and farm to early care. At the federal level, the program is referred to as local foods for schools and childcare. Unfortunately, because that funding comes from the CCC, we are not allowed to take any admin for it. In other words, USDA is entering into a cooperative agreement with the state for over $17 million, but it doesn't include any administrative costs. So this language would simply allow the agency to use a portion of that total of $1.294 million to help leverage that $17 million that could be coming from the USDA.
So, Mr. Chair, so what's happening now as far as the admin costs? Where's that money coming from?
Ms. Bress.
Mr. Chair, Senator Anderson, right now, our Farm to School program is paid for, our grant program is paid for out of the Agri Fund at about $1.15 million per year once we back out Kate's salary. So we're able to use administrative funds to administer our Agri Farm to School grant program. The big difference here is the size of the program. Right now under the Agri program, we do grants of about $1.1 to $1.2 million per year. This would be significantly larger. We're talking 10 times the amount of funds that would be available to schools. So also the cost to administer that also goes up.
So, Mr. Chair.
Senator Anderson.
then this money is then on top of what Agri is providing
Ms. Press.
for admin costs.
Mr. Chair, Senator Anderson, these funds would come out of the 1.294 that's currently included in the Agri base for Farm to School. So there would not be any new money.
It doesn't say that. That's why I was wondering.
Sure.
Thank you. Members of the questions or comments for the author or the testifiers? Seeing none, any final statements, Senator Gustafson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank everybody coming together. Get away. It's freezing outside, so it's really appreciate having the farmers be here in person, which is no small thing to do. So appreciate them, and they should be offered some pictures, but when we're done here.
Certainly. All right, folks. So Senate File 1559 will be laid over for possible inclusion. Folks, that's our last order of business. Thanks for being efficient, thoughtful, diligent, engaged today. I think it was a pretty good day. Our next session is, again, a meeting of the Subcommittee on Veterans. So some of you have the day off. The rest of us will be talking about some serious mental health concerns in our veterans community. And we'll also be discussing a policy bill from the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs and from the Military Affairs Committee. All business being done, we are now adjourned.